Hello friends, today I want to answer the question, are long-term rentals or short-term rentals more popular? To rent or not to rent? That is the question. But when we talk about that, which is more profitable, long-term rentals or short-term rentals? Well, by the end of this video, you'll have a complete understanding of the dynamics of which is more profitable, long-term rentals or short-term rentals, which will ultimately help you understand which one is the better investment for you and that best aligns with your lifestyle and financial goals. So what drives the profitability difference between these two rental strategies? How do factors like market demand, maintenance costs, and tenant turnover influence the income potential of both strategies? Well, let's dive in and answer these questions by first defining what a long-term rental is and what a short-term rental is. Next, I'm going to cover the pros and cons of each strategy. And finally, I'll reveal which strategy I'm a huge fan of and why. So if you're ready, let's go. First off, whether it's a short-term rental or a long-term rental, we need to talk about how awesome real estate is when it comes to the rental market. Think about it. You own an asset. This asset typically appreciates over time and it hardly ever goes down in value, especially if you're in the right markets. Now, I'm not saying that's never going to happen where you have an asset that goes down in value, but if you look consistently in the historical data over time, a home is an appreciating asset. So you have an appreciating asset, and if you have somebody else living there and paying you rent, they are paying your mortgage payment and typically your maintenance, your expenses, everything on top of that. And so you have a zero cost. Now there's liability, but zero cost on an asset that is growing year over year. And let's say that you did something like this that I wish I would have done when I first got started in real estate, is buy a property on a 15-year mortgage rather than a 30-year mortgage. If you held on to that property for 15 years and you rented it every single year, and maybe that's 15 different families, maybe it's 10 different families. But over the course of 15 years, that asset would be completely paid for with potentially zero money out of your pocket and be an asset you own that you could turn around and sell and typically receive in today's market hundreds of thousands of dollars for that. So thinking about it like that, real estate is completely awesome, especially a rental market, whether you're doing a short-term rental or a long-term rental, because of that aspect of people paying all your mortgage and expenses and something that's appreciating, while at the same time, every payment they make chips away at the balance you owe on that mortgage. So now that we agree real estate's awesome, especially the real estate rental market, let's talk about and let's define a long-term rental. So this is typically someplace that someone wants to stay for longer than 12 months. And they fall under this category. Those are apartments. Those are single family homes that are being rented out. Could be a condo, could be a townhome, but you get the picture. Any place that somebody can stay for a longer period of time. And the upsides of long-term rentals is you typically have one tenant that stays there for a long period of time, so you're dealing with one person the whole time. What's the downside of long-term rentals? There's lower rates potentially, right? You're gonna have lots of doors and there's gonna be a lot of upkeep, right? So let's say you own a fourplex, you've got 4 different tenants. Because it's a fourplex, you're renting out each door for probably less than maybe you could on a short-term rental. I'll explain why in a second. And because there's 4 different tenants, you're dealing with 4 different people, there's upkeep for 4 different units. And a lot of times if you're buying a long-term rental unit that has multiple units inside of it, that's gonna be much more expensive. And typically when you're buying an investment property like that, it's gonna be a larger down payment. So that's one disadvantage of a long-term rental. You know, when I first got started in real estate, I almost did it in reverse. Our business at the time had been doing really well, and myself and I had a few partners, a few people that were really close friends of mine, we decided to go into real estate. And because our business had been doing well, we looked to deploy a significant amount of capital into an asset. We looked at some fourplexes and an apartment complex right off the bat. But I remember trying to get a loan as younger professionals for an apartment complex of 46 units was extremely difficult. And the amount of money that they wanted down to do the loan, that all the banks that I talked to, was pretty significant. So at that time, short-term rentals really didn't exist. This is before 2007 when Airbnb came on the scene, but I remember that being a disadvantage of long-term rentals. So now that we understand short-term rentals, some advantages, disadvantages, let's talk about short-term rentals. These are short-term stays. We're typically talking about 1 night, maybe up to 28 nights, and depending on which state you're in, that definition could vary all the way up to 90 nights. And it's typically in vacation areas, cities, people that want to travel to and take their family on vacation. The cool thing about a short-term rental as well is you can visit it anytime you want and take your family. Not this summer, but the summer before last, summer of 2023, my family and I went and visited 3 of the short-term rentals we had in kind of the Midwestern to southeastern part of the United States. So we started in Oklahoma near Broken Bow, where we had a short-term rental there, traveled down the southeastern part of the United States, stayed in our short-term rental close to Disney, and then finished finished up staying in a short-term rental just north of Atlanta in Blue Ridge, Georgia. And so that was a really cool experience to be able to go and stay at these Airbnbs, these short-term rentals that we own, that we make money from, but also could enjoy ourselves as our family. So what are the upside to short-term rentals? Well, there's potentially more money with one unit or one door. Because you're renting out this at a short-term stay, nightly rates are much more expensive than monthly rates. And so the fact that you have one door, one unit, one single family home that's rented out as a short-term rental versus a long-term rental, let's say that this long-term rental, you're getting $1,500 a month, but as a short-term rental, short-term stay, you might be getting, say, $200 a night. And if it's filled up just half the time, at 15 days times 200, that's $3,000 versus $1,500 as a long-term stay. So that is definitely one advantage to short-term rentals. And as I mentioned, it's a place you can go as a family, but another advantage is a lot of times if it's a single family home, you can get into that property with much less than maybe a big investment into a long-term rental like we had with the apartment complex that I mentioned. And so I had a similar experience when I purchased the home in Blue Ridge, Georgia. Because it was a second home loan in my name, I only had to put down 10% versus 20, 25, or 30% if it were an investment property. Now, what's the downside of a short-term rental? Where there's typically lots of turnover, right? You have guests coming in every 2 nights, every 4 nights, every 7 nights. So there is a lot of turnover. You have to deal with a lot of different guests for that one unit. And because there's a lot of turnover, there's a lot of wear and tear. There's things that get broken, things that need to be replaced. There's higher maintenance costs. So associated with short-term rentals is more wear and tear. So as you try to determine whether a short-term rental or a long-term rental is better for you, what does your current situation say about which one might be right? Now, if you're somebody who values time more than money, then potentially a long-term rental is going to be better for you. If you've got money to put into a long-term rental, an apartment complex, multi-units, and you don't have to worry about a lot of turnover, you get one guest in that unit for 12 months, 24 months, that is going to take a lot less of your time than if that were a short-term rental. But if you do have time and you value money more, then a short-term rental could be exactly what is most beneficial for you because you have one unit, but you have a lot of guests going in there, so it's going to require more of your time. Now, once you get systems and processes down, that time that you invest into those different guests could all be systematized and be much less over time. I know I self-manage a lot of the units that I have for short-term rentals, and it was pretty strenuous getting started. However, once I got systems in place, my canned responses, and I'm able to do that on an app that pops up and notifies me, it becomes a lot less of a time restraint than it used to be. So how is profitability factored into these two strategies? Well, they're both fairly similar. If you're looking at calculating profitability on a long-term rental, you take the rents, you minus out the expenses, which include property management fees that exist and operational costs like repairs, lawn care, snow removal, utilities, gas, electric, water, heat. All those things are factored in. So you take the total rent, total expenses, that'll give you a profitability of that unit. And short-term rentals are virtually the same. You take the total rents minus the expenses, and that leaves you with profitability. But one thing to note, if you're looking to buy a short-term rental, there's actually a formula that I use that gives me just that instant analysis, whether it's a good deal or not. And it goes like this. If you are looking to buy a short-term rental, and let's say that total annual rents are at least 10% of the purchase price, it's something worth investigating further. If total annual rents are 15%, so for example, let's take a $500,000 home or a $500,000 short-term rental, and let's say the annual rents are $75,000. That's 15% of the purchase price. That is a good deal, a really good deal, and I would investigate it even further. Now, if annual rents are 20%, so in the example I just used, if you found a $500,000 short-term rental and annual rents were $100,000 or more, that is a do not pass up deal. So that is something that I typically utilize when I'm looking at short-term rentals that give me that instant knowledge whether I should pursue it further or not. And with long-term rentals, there's something called the 1% rule. So whatever you're purchasing the long-term rental asset for, the rent should be at least 1% of that purchase price. So if you're looking at a $250,000 home, you should be able to get rents each month from that at $2,500. Now, obviously, interest rates play a huge role in this, right? And we know that interest rates are higher now than they've been in a long time. There are rumors that next month in September, interest rates are going to be going down. So we'll see if that happens. We don't know yet, but interest rates play an absolutely major role in determining profitability of these different assets we're looking at, whether it's a long-term rental or a short-term rental. So which one is more profitable? Which one do I like and why? Well, I'm a big fan of short-term rentals because I love the ability to make a lot more money with one unit than multiple units, and the ability to get into a home, it seems like the barrier to entry is a lot lower. And just to give you an example, as I mentioned early on in my career, we'd bought a 46-unit apartment complex, and it was awesome. I wish I still owned it to this day. today. I was able to turn it and sell it 3-4 years later for a decent profit. But at the time, I remember getting rents for 1 month and it was about $25,000. And this is 20 years ago. But I'll tell you, last summer, and maybe even this summer, close to it, but our best month in one of our short-term rentals near Yellowstone National Park was $38,000. So 1 unit, 1 home, 1 cabin, pulled in $38,000 in 1 month compared to a 46-unit apartment complex. Now, given this is 20 years ago, but pulling in $23,000. And that same unit today would probably pull in about $40,000, $45,000. But comparing apples to apples, 1 unit at close to $40,000 and another unit in today's terms maybe at $40,000, $45,000. That's one reason I like short-term rentals, because your ability to pull in more money is so much greater. The barrier to entry is lower, and I'm a big fan of short-term rentals. Don't get me wrong, I love long-term rentals as well as part of a strategy, and I've even shifted some of my strategy to what I'm doing today, more towards some long-term rental options, but short-term rentals will always be near and dear to my heart because of those reasons. Now, this is my experience. I'd love to know what you've seen. Do you love long-term rentals more or short-term rentals more, and why? Please comment below. Let's engage in a dialogue, and as always, just for stopping by and watching the video, I've got a free gift for you. It's aaronsfreetraining.com. It is a short-term rental calculator. You put in the income, the home cost, all the expenses, and it spits out to you whether it's a good deal or not. So you don't have to go through all the analysis yourself. This tool will do it for you. And as always, I appreciate you stopping by. Have an amazing day.